There is a conspiracy theory. Ricardo Lozano is not really RL Crazy 1, but Johnny Sins is the real RL Crazy 1 from the original timeline before Mahatma Gandhi got the time stone to change our reality. In our original timeline, Mr. O.J. Simpson was our president before the assassination attempt by Ray Blade, but failed meanwhile in Russia. Supreme Leader Danny DeVito has developed a clone army of Julians to take over Jamaica. In our original timeline, Kurt McSassafras was a dictator of Canada. Kurt wanted to take over Ohio, but no one knows why he wanted Ohio.
Send our forces to Ohio to receive the time stone before fucking Mahatma Gandhi gets it.
Meanwhile, in Russia, the Julian clone army started a rebellion against Danny DeVito for not allowing Julians to play Dead Space. The Julian clone army succeeded to kill Danny DeVito. The Julian clone army has renamed Russia to Julian Island. But a few hours later, the leader of Turkey has launched nukes filled with salt to kill the Julian clone army. Only a few survived. Julian was furious. Julian launched nukes filled with deadly farts that killed nearly half the population in Turkey. 5 years have passed and Julian has taken control of the world except Ohio. The whole world worships Julian. Julian sends his military to capture Kurt McSassafras and Daniel for treason against his new empire. Kurt and Daniel have joined forces to take down Julian and his new empire. They are taking refuge somewhere in Ohio. Kurt has some people in the inside to get information.
Kurt, I don't know how much time I have left. I think they're on to me. But Julian is planning something big. I don't know what it is yet.
Whoever brings me Kurt McSassafras and Daniel will be rewarded with great fortune.
Julian has put a bounty on Kurt McSassafras, and Daniel, to whoever captures them, will be rewarded. Julian's second-in-command officer, Branto, has started a genocide in order to find Daniel and Kurt. He has established camps all over Canada where he is executing Canadians. Julian has dispatched all of his forces worldwide to search for Daniel and Kurt's rebellion. In addition, he has launched nuclear weapons in specific locations. Branto has released his hound dog, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to snuff out Kurt McSassafras and Daniel to locate them. Daniel had been on the run for weeks, hiding from Julian's military forces. He had been separated from Kurt and was alone, without any allies to help him. One day, as he was walking through a deserted town, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly ducked into an alleyway, hoping to avoid detection. But it was too late. Branto, one of Julian's most ruthless military commanders, had spotted him. Branto had been tracking Daniel for days, and he knew that he had finally caught his prey. Branto ordered his soldiers to surround the alleyway, trapping Daniel inside. Daniel knew that he was outnumbered and outmatched, but he refused to go down without a fight. He drew his weapon and prepared to defend himself. The soldiers charged towards him, their weapons at the ready. Daniel fired off several shots, taking out a few of them. But there were too many of them, and eventually, they overwhelmed him. Branto approached Daniel, a cruel smile on his face. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Daniel knew that he was in trouble. Branto ordered his soldiers to take Daniel back to Julian's headquarters, where he would be interrogated and punished for his crimes against the Empire. Daniel was thrown into a cell, where he spent days in darkness, unsure of his fate. But he refused to give up hope. He knew that he had to find a way to escape and continue his fight against Julian's tyranny. One day, as he was pacing back and forth in his cell, he noticed a loose brick in the wall. He quickly realized that it was the perfect opportunity to escape. Using all his strength, he managed to pry the brick loose and squeeze through the hole. He found himself in a dark tunnel, and he knew that he had to move quickly if he wanted to avoid being caught. Daniel crawled through the tunnel, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the sounds of guards patrolling outside, and he knew that he was in danger. But he refused to give up. He kept moving forward, determined to make his escape. Eventually, he reached the end of the tunnel, where he emerged into a deserted courtyard. He quickly made his way out of the courtyard and into the city beyond. He knew that he had narrowly escaped death, and he was grateful for the opportunity to continue his fight against Julian's empire. Daniel disappeared into the shadows, ready to continue his rebellion and fight for the freedom of the people. Julian had finally had enough of Kurt and Daniel's rebellion. He knew that they had been gaining more and more support, and he knew that he needed to take action before they grew too powerful. Julian called a meeting with his most trusted military commanders to discuss a plan to destroy Kurt and Daniel's rebellion once and for all. They brainstormed for hours, going over every possible strategy and tactic that they could use. Finally, they settled on a plan. They would launch a massive attack on the rebel forces, targeting their stronghold and wiping them out. Julian ordered his soldiers to begin mobilizing, sending them out to gather intelligence and prepare for the attack. He knew that it would be a difficult battle, but he was confident in his army's ability to defeat the rebels. Kurt and Daniel knew that an attack was coming, but they weren't sure when or where. They had been preparing for a long time, fortifying their stronghold and training their soldiers to defend themselves. As the days went by, tension grew between the two sides. Julian's forces continued to gather intelligence, and Kurt and Daniel's forces prepared for the worst. Finally, the day of the attack arrived. Julian's army marched towards the rebel stronghold, their weapons at the ready. They launched a massive assault, bombarding the fortress with rockets and bombs. Kurt and Daniel's forces fought bravely, but they were no match for Julian's superior army. The battle raged on for hours, with casualties mounting on both sides. Finally, Kurt and Daniel realized that they had no choice but to surrender. They knew that they had lost the battle, but they refused to give up on their cause. They vowed to continue fighting against Julian's tyranny, no matter what the cost. As they were taken into custody, Kurt and Daniel could only hope that their sacrifice would inspire others to join the fight for freedom. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Kurt and Daniel had been imprisoned in Julian's headquarters for weeks. They had been subjected to brutal interrogations and torture, but they refused to give up any information about their rebellion. They knew that they had to stay strong, even in the face of their captors' cruelty. One night, as they were being moved from their cells to the interrogation room, they noticed that their guards were distracted. Kurt and Daniel quickly saw an opportunity to escape. Without hesitation, they sprang into action, taking down the guards and making a run for it. They ran down the corridors, trying to find a way out of the building. They could hear the sounds of alarms blaring and soldiers shouting as they pursued them. But they were determined to make it out alive. They fought their way through the building, taking out any guards that stood in their way. They were almost at the exit when they heard a familiar voice behind them. It was Branto, one of Julian's most ruthless commanders. He had been tasked with capturing Kurt and Daniel, and he wasn't going to let them get away. Kurt knew that they were in trouble. He told Daniel to go on without him, to escape while he held off Branto. Daniel refused, insisting that they would make it out together. But Kurt knew that he didn't have much time. He could hear the sound of Branto's soldiers getting closer. He knew that he had to act fast if he wanted to save his friend. Kurt turned to Daniel and said,
"Oh, go, I'll hold them off. You have to keep fighting. Don't let them win."
Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. He knew that Kurt was sacrificing himself for him, and he was grateful for his friend's bravery. Kurt turned and faced Branto and his soldiers. He drew his weapon and charged towards them, ready to take on the entire army if he had to. The battle was fierce, but Kurt fought with all his might. He took out several soldiers, but he knew that he was outnumbered. He could feel his strength fading, but he refused to give up. In the end, Kurt fell in battle, his body riddled with bullets. But he had saved Daniel, and he knew that his sacrifice had been worth it. Daniel escaped from the headquarters and continued to fight for their cause, inspired by Kurt's bravery and sacrifice. He knew that they still had a long way to go, but he was determined to see it through to the end, for Kurt and for all those who had fallen before him. Daniel knew he couldn't take on Julian's empire alone. He needed a team, people he could trust to have his back no matter what. He thought about the people he had met over the years, the ones who had shown him kindness and loyalty. And then he had an idea. He reached out to Anna, a former journalist who had risked her life to expose corruption and injustice. She was fearless and tenacious, and he knew she would be an asset to his cause. He also contacted Kermit the Frog, a charismatic puppet who had a way with words. Kermit had a way of bringing people together and inspiring them to do great things, and Daniel knew he would be a great addition to the team. Finally, he reached out to Jose, a skilled hacker who had worked for Julian's empire in the past. Jose had turned his back on Julian when he saw the atrocities he was committing, and he had been living in hiding ever since. But Daniel knew that Jose's expertise would be invaluable in taking down Julian's empire from the inside. The four of them met in a secret location, where Daniel laid out his plan. They would work together to gather information about Julian's operations, to find weaknesses and vulnerabilities that they could exploit. They would use their unique skills and talents to complement each other, and they would never give up, no matter how difficult the task. Anna, Kermit, and Jose were all in. They knew the risks, but they also knew that they couldn't sit back and watch as Julian's empire destroyed everything they held dear. They would fight, and they would win, no matter what. And so, the team was born. A ragtag group of rebels, united by a common goal. They set out to take down Julian's empire one step at a time, never knowing what the future held, but always believing that they could make a difference. Daniel sat down with his team, Anna, Kermit the Frog, and Jose, to discuss their plan to take down Julian's empire. They were all still reeling from the loss of Kurt, who had sacrificed himself to save Daniel during their last mission. "We have to honor Kurt's sacrifice," Daniel said. "We can't let his death be in vain. We need to take down Julian's empire and stop him from doing any more harm." Anna nodded in agreement. "But how do we do that?" she asked. "Julian's army is too strong for us to take on alone." "We'll need a plan," Jose chimed in. "A good one, something that will catch them off guard." Kermit nodded in agreement. "And we'll need to be smart about it. We can't just charge in blindly and hope for the best." Daniel took a deep breath. "I've been doing some research, and I think I've found a weakness in Julian's empire. He's been relying heavily on a new technology that he's been developing. Cyborgs." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Cyborgs? Like half man, half machine?" Daniel nodded. "Exactly. And I've discovered that the technology he's using to create these cyborgs is flawed. There's a weakness in the programming that we can exploit." The team looked at each other, a sense of excitement and determination building within them. "If we can take out the cyborgs, we can cripple Julian's army," Kermit said. Jose nodded. "And we can use that as an opening to strike at his base and take him out." Anna stood up. "Then let's get to work. We have a lot of planning to do." The team spent the next several days coming up with a detailed plan of attack. They scouted out Julian's base, gathered information on his cyborg army, and devised a way to exploit the weakness in the programming. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The team donned their gear and set out to take down Julian's empire once and for all. The mission was a success. They were able to take out the cyborgs and use the chaos to strike at Julian's base. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the team emerged victorious. As they stood over the ruins of Julian's empire, Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. They had honored Kurt's sacrifice and had taken down the tyrant who had caused so much harm. "Kurt would be proud of us," Daniel said as they walked away from the rubble. The team nodded in agreement. Kurt may have been gone, but his memory lived on through their actions, and they would continue to fight for justice and freedom, no matter the cost. Daniel and his team, Anna, Kermit the Frog, and Jose, were determined to take down Julian's empire in honor of Kurt's sacrifice. They had spent weeks planning and strategizing, going over every detail and potential obstacle. Their plan was to infiltrate one of Bronto's research facilities, where he was said to be working on a new and advanced weapon system for Julian's army. They knew it would be heavily guarded, but they were prepared for the challenge. As they approached the facility, they quickly realized that the security was even more intense than they had anticipated. They had to take out several guards and disable the alarm system before they could even enter the building. Once inside, they split up to cover more ground. Anna and Kermit went to search for the weapon system, while Daniel and Jose searched for any information that could be useful to their cause. But as they were searching, they were suddenly ambushed by a group of Bronto's men. They fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the chaos, Jose was hit by a stray bullet and fell to the ground. Daniel and the others tried to help him, but it was too late. He had already lost too much blood. Devastated by their loss, Daniel and his team knew that they had to keep going. They couldn't let Jose's sacrifice be in vain. They pressed on, determined to complete their mission and take down Julian's empire once and for all. As Daniel's team continued their infiltration of Bronto's facility, Anna and Kermit the Frog were making their way deeper into the complex. Their mission was to locate and disable the new weapon system that Bronto was developing for Julian's army. As they crept through the dimly lit corridors, they heard the sound of voices up ahead. They quickly hid behind a nearby stack of crates and peered out to see what was going on. To their surprise, they saw a group of scientists huddled around a strange cylindrical device. They were talking excitedly about their latest breakthrough and how it would change everything. Anna and Kermit couldn't make out all the details of what was being said, but they knew that this wasn't the weapon system they were looking for. They had stumbled upon something else entirely. Curiosity getting the better of them, they crept closer to get a better look. Suddenly, one of the scientists spotted them and let out a scream. The other scientists immediately sprang into action, activating some kind of security system that caused the entire room to start shaking violently. Anna and Kermit stumbled and fell to the ground as alarms blared and lights flashed all around them. In the chaos, they noticed that the strange device had started to glow and emit a strange, pulsing energy. They had no idea what was going on, but they knew they had to get out of there before something bad happened. They quickly regrouped with Daniel and made their escape, still shaken by the strange twist they had uncovered. They knew that Bronto's facility held even more secrets than they had originally thought, and that the fight against Julian's empire was far from over. Daniel had lost his friend Kurt to Julian's empire, and his team had suffered a major loss with the death of Jose. But they were not going to back down. Daniel, Anna, and Kermit the Frog knew that they had to continue the fight to bring down Julian's empire and put an end to Bronto's twisted experiments. They had a plan, and it involved infiltrating Julian's heavily guarded headquarters. They had to move quickly, as they knew that Bronto's forces were closing in on them. They snuck into the building, using their wits and cunning to avoid detection. As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, they encountered a group of Julian's soldiers. They quickly took them out, but not before one of them sounded the alarm. They knew they had to move faster. Finally, they reached the heart of the headquarters. There, they found Julian himself, standing in front of a massive supercomputer. "What are you doing here?" Julian sneered. "Don't you know this is a secure facility?" "We're here to put an end to your empire," Daniel said, drawing his weapon. Julian laughed. "You think you can stop me? I have the power of Siram at my disposal." At that moment, they heard a familiar voice. It was Bronto, and he was holding a device that looked like a remote control. "You fools," Bronto said. "You think you can defeat us? I have a surprise for you." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind Julian. It was a clone of Kurt. Daniel was taken aback. "What is this? What have you done?" "I cloned your friend," Bronto said, "and I used his memories to create a perfect copy. You see, I knew you wouldn't be able to resist coming here to try and take down Julian, so I thought, why not give you something to distract you?" The clone of Kurt looked just like the real Kurt. He even sounded like him. But Daniel was not fooled. "I know that's not the real Kurt," he said. "You can't replace a human being with a machine," Bronto sneered. "Oh, I think we can, and we will." Suddenly, Anna sprang into action. She rushed towards Bronto, grabbing the device from his hand. "Kermit, take out Julian!" she shouted. Kermit jumped into action, using his agility to dodge Julian's attacks. He landed a punch to Julian's face, causing him to stumble. Meanwhile, Anna had figured out how to use the device. She pressed a button, and suddenly the clone of Kurt began to malfunction. Sparks flew from his body, and he collapsed to the ground. The fight was not over, but Daniel and his team had gained the upper hand. They had discovered Bronto's plan, and they had taken out Julian's right-hand man. They knew that they still had a long way to go, but they were determined to keep fighting until they had brought down Julian's empire for good. Daniel had been so focused on taking down Julian's empire that he had neglected his personal life. But everything changed when he met Megan. Megan was beautiful, intelligent, and driven, just like Daniel. They hit it off instantly and soon started dating. Megan was a bright spot in Daniel's life, and he felt grateful to have her by his side as he fought against Julian. But little did Daniel know that Julian had been watching him closely and had discovered his relationship with Megan. Julian was determined to use this to his advantage and to bring Daniel down. Julian had his operatives follow Megan, gathering information on her and her relationship with Daniel. He discovered that Megan worked at a laboratory that was working on a top-secret project, and he saw an opportunity to use this to his advantage. Julian contacted the head of the laboratory, Dr. Richards, and offered him a substantial amount of money to tamper with the project and make it seem like Megan was involved. Dr. Richards, who had been struggling financially, agreed to the deal. Megan was shocked when she found out that she had been framed for something she didn't do. She was devastated when she realized that Daniel might believe the false accusations against her. When Daniel found out about the accusations against Megan, he was heartbroken. He couldn't believe that someone he cared about so deeply could be involved in something like this. But after investigating, he realized that the evidence against her was fabricated. Daniel knew that Julian was behind the scheme, and he was determined to take him down once and for all. Anna had been a valuable member of Daniel's team since they first set out to take down Julian's empire. She was always eager to help, and had proven herself to be trustworthy time and time again. However, one fateful day, everything changed. Anna's true allegiance was revealed, and Daniel's team was left to pick up the pieces. It all began when they received word that Julian was planning to make a public appearance at a high-profile event. Daniel's team saw this as an opportunity to strike and take down the leader of the empire once and for all. They spent weeks strategizing and preparing for the mission, confident that they would succeed. On the day of the event, as they made their way through the crowded venue, Anna suddenly went missing. They searched for her frantically, but she was nowhere to be found. As they approached Julian, they were met with heavy resistance from his guards. They fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Suddenly Anna appeared, guns blazing, taking out Daniel's team members one by one. Daniel was shocked and couldn't believe what was happening. How could someone they trusted turn on them like this? It was then that he realized that Anna had been working for Julian this whole time. With Julian and Anna's combined forces, Daniel's team was quickly overpowered and captured. Julian taunted them, revealing that he had known their every move and had been a step ahead of them the entire time. As they were being taken away, Daniel couldn't help but feel betrayed and defeated. He never would have suspected that Anna, someone he had grown to trust and rely on, would be working for Julian all along. The road ahead would be difficult, but Daniel knew that he had to regroup and come up with a new plan to take down Julian's empire, this time without Anna's help. He couldn't let her betrayal stop him from achieving his goal, even if it meant going up against a former ally. Daniel sat in the visitor's room of the maximum security prison, waiting for his turn to see Branto, the mastermind behind Julian's sinister plans. He had come here to get information about Anna and Julian's next move. The guards brought Branto to the room, and Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Branto sat across from Daniel, a smug grin on his face. "What brings you here, Daniel?" he asked. "I need information about Anna and Julian," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. Branto chuckled. "And why would I give you that information?" "Because you owe me," Daniel replied firmly. "I kept you alive. Now it's time for you to repay the favor." Branto leaned back in his chair, considering Daniel's words. "Very well. What do you want to know?" Daniel leaned forward. "What's their next move? Where are they hiding?" Branto shook his head. "I don't know. They cut ties with me after I was captured. But I can tell you this. Julian won't stop until he has complete control. He's ruthless, and he won't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in his way." Daniel gritted his teeth. "What about Anna? Why did she turn against us?" Branto's grin widened. "Ah, Anna. She was always loyal to Julian. She was the one who helped him escape. And she's the one who took Megan. Julian thinks he can use her against you." Daniel felt his blood boil. "Where are they holding her?" "I don't know," Branto said with a shrug. "But I do know that Julian won't let her go easily. You need to be careful, Daniel. Julian is a dangerous man, and he has no mercy." Daniel stood up, his fists clenched. "I'll take my chances." As he left the prison, Daniel couldn't help but think about what Branto had said. He knew he was walking into a trap, but he had to save Megan, and he had to stop Julian once and for all. Daniel had been relentlessly searching for Julian's new secret headquarters, but it seemed to be well hidden from his prying eyes. His team had been working tirelessly to gather information on the location, but all their efforts seemed to be in vain. One day, a lead came up. They received intel that Julian had a new secret headquarters in a remote part of the country. Daniel and his team set off immediately to investigate. As they approached the location, they saw that it was a heavily guarded fortress, surrounded by high walls and barbed wire fences. They knew they had to be careful and devise a plan to infiltrate the facility without getting caught. After days of surveillance and reconnaissance, they finally found an entry point. They made their move under the cover of darkness and snuck into the facility undetected. Once inside, they split up to search for Megan and any other captives. As Daniel made his way through the maze-like corridors, he came across a room that piqued his interest. The door was heavily guarded, and he knew there must be something valuable inside. He signaled his team, and they launched an attack on the guards. They managed to take them down quickly, and Daniel burst into the room, only to be met with a shocking sight. There, in the middle of the room, was Kurt, the man they thought had sacrificed himself for their cause. He was alive, but locked up in a cell, barely conscious and heavily guarded. Daniel was taken aback by the sight of his friend, but he quickly realized the twist in the situation. Julian had kept Kurt alive as leverage against Daniel and his team. Suddenly, he heard a scream from another room. It was Megan, and she was in danger. Daniel knew he had to act fast. He signaled his team, and they raced towards Megan's location. As they entered the room, they saw Anna, who had been working for Julian all along, holding Megan hostage. Kermit, who had been trying to save Megan, lay lifeless on the ground. Daniel was filled with rage and sorrow at the loss of his friend. He also knew he had to act fast to save Megan before it was too late. He lunged at Anna, and a fierce battle ensued. After a few intense moments, Daniel finally managed to subdue Anna and free Megan from her clutches. They quickly made their way out of the facility, with Kurt still locked up inside. As they drove away, Daniel couldn't help but think of his fallen comrade and the twisted plan that Julian had devised to keep Kurt alive as a bargaining chip. He vowed to bring down Julian's empire no matter the cost. Daniel had been investigating Julian's past for weeks now, trying to find a weakness in his enemy's armor. He had hit a dead end until he stumbled upon an old family photo of Julian's parents. In the photo, he noticed something strange, a second child who was not Julian. After some digging, Daniel discovered that Julian had a twin brother named Jabba, who had been locked up in a mental institution for years. Daniel realized that he had to find Jabba to learn more about Julian's true nature and motivations. Daniel managed to sneak into the institution and found Jabba in a heavily guarded room. Jabba was a shell of a man, barely coherent and unable to communicate properly. But as Daniel started to talk to him, he suddenly became lucid. "Julian is not who you think he is," Jabba said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "He's been lying to you this whole time. He's not even Julian. He's me." Daniel was taken aback by this revelation. "What do you mean?" "Julian and I are twins," Jabba explained. "We were separated at birth, and he took on the identity of Julian while I was locked up here. He's been using his power and influence to keep me locked up and hidden from the world." Daniel's mind was racing with the implications of this information. If Jabba was telling the truth, it would mean that everything he thought he knew about Julian was a lie. But he needed proof. "I need to see some evidence," Daniel said. Jabba nodded, and he pulled out a hidden compartment under his bed. Inside was a birth certificate with 2 names on it, Julian and Jabba. "This is the proof you need," Jabba said, handing the certificate to Daniel. "You have to stop him no matter the cost." Julian and Anna had ruled their empire with an iron fist for years, but their reign was finally coming to an end. Daniel had gathered a team of dedicated rebels who were determined to bring down the tyrannical rulers and restore peace to the land. After months of preparation, Daniel and his team finally launched their attack on the empire's main stronghold. The battle was fierce and lasted for hours, but eventually, the rebels were able to breach the palace walls and fight their way to the throne room. There, they found Julian and Anna, both armed and ready to fight. Daniel approached them calmly, his weapon lowered. "It's over, Julian," he said. "You and Anna have been defeated." Julian laughed bitterly. "You think this is the end? You think you've won? You have no idea what you've unleashed." But it was too late for Julian's threats. The rebels had taken control of the palace, and the people of the empire were celebrating in the streets. Julian and Anna were placed under arrest and taken away to stand trial for their crimes. In the aftermath of the battle, Daniel was hailed as a hero. He had united the rebels and led them to victory against impossible odds. The people of the empire were grateful to him for freeing them from the tyranny of Julian and Anna. As for Kurt, it was later discovered that he had indeed survived his supposed death and had been secretly imprisoned by Julian and Anna all along. He was rescued by the rebels and reunited with his old friend Daniel. With Julian and Anna's empire now in ruins, Daniel and his team began the long process of rebuilding and restoring order to the land. It would not be easy, but they were determined to make sure that the horrors of Julian and Anna's rule would never be repeated. Daniel and Megan had been through a lot together. They had faced challenges, danger, and heartbreak, but they always came out stronger on the other side. Now, they were finally getting married, and they couldn't be happier. It had been several months since the end of Julian and Anna's empire. With their leaders gone and their forces scattered, the remnants of their army had quickly fallen apart. The world was finally free from their reign of terror. Daniel and Megan had taken some time to recover from the events that had unfolded. They had mourned the loss of their friends, Kurt, Kermit, and Jose. But they had also celebrated their victory and the new opportunities that lay ahead. Now, on their wedding day, they were surrounded by their loved ones, both old and new. There was no fear or danger, only love and happiness. As they exchanged their vows, they couldn't help but think about everything they had been through to get to this point. But they knew that their love had only grown stronger because of it. After the ceremony, they danced the night away with their friends and family. They laughed, they cried, and they celebrated the start of their new life together. As the night drew to a close, they shared a quiet moment together. Megan took Daniel's hand and looked into his eyes. "I never thought we would make it to this day," she said softly. Daniel smiled at her. "Neither did I, but we did it together, and that's all that matters." They leaned in for a kiss, and in that moment, they knew that they were truly happy. They had faced their greatest challenges and come out stronger on the other side. And now, they were ready to face whatever the future held, together.